Facing our deepest fears is one of the most profound and transformative experiences we can undergo on the spiritual path. We often think of fear as something that holds us back, something to be avoided or suppressed. Fear, in our culture, is typically seen as an obstacle to personal growth, something that limits our potential and keeps us stuck in old patterns. However, Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, saw fear in a very different light. For Jung, fear was not just an obstacle. It was a powerful tool for transformation, an essential part of the individuation process, and a key to unlocking our fullest potential. Jung believed that facing our darkest fears was one of the most important steps toward becoming our authentic selves. The fears we experience are often linked to the unconscious mind, to the parts of ourselves that we have repressed or denied. These fears are not just random or meaningless. They are signals, revealing the areas of our psyche that need to be integrated and understood. Our deepest fears are often connected to the shadow, the unconscious part of our personality that contains all the aspects of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The shadow is not inherently evil or negative. It is simply the parts of ourselves that we have rejected, ignored, or suppressed because they don't fit the persona we present to the world. These are often the qualities that society deems unacceptable: anger, jealousy, greed, or even our vulnerability. But these parts of ourselves are just as much a part of our psyche as the qualities we embrace. Jung believed that we must integrate the shadow in order to become whole. And this integration begins with facing the fears that keep us separated from these hidden parts of ourselves. When we face our fears, we are essentially confronting the shadow. The fear may manifest in many ways: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, or fear of the unknown. These fears are deeply ingrained in us, often shaped by our early life experiences, societal conditioning, and the unconscious patterns we carry. At first, the fear may seem overwhelming, something we cannot face or conquer. But Jung argued that these fears are not meant to be avoided. They are the gateways to understanding the deeper aspects of our psyche. By confronting them, we can begin the process of healing, growth, and transformation. Jung understood that fear is not something to be eliminated, but something to be understood and integrated. When we run away from our fears or try to repress them, they only grow stronger. The more we avoid them, the more power they have over us. But when we face our fears head-on, we take away their power. We begin to see that fear is not an enemy to be fought, but a messenger to be understood. Fear tells us where we need to heal, where we need to grow, and where we need to become more conscious of our own unconscious material. Facing our darkest fears can be a terrifying process, but it is also incredibly liberating. Jung believed that by confronting our fears, we can break free from the limitations imposed by the ego and the unconscious. The ego, which thrives on control and certainty, is terrified of losing its grip on the self. But true growth comes when we let go of the ego's need for control and embrace the unknown, the unpredictable, and the chaotic forces within us. These are the forces that drive creativity, transformation, and spiritual growth. The process of facing our fears often involves a deep reckoning with the parts of ourselves that we have rejected or ignored. When we are afraid of something, it is usually because we have repressed it. Whether it is a feeling, a desire, or a part of our identity that we do not want to accept. For example, if we fear rejection, it may be because we have not fully accepted our own need for connection and love. If we fear failure, it may be because we have not accepted our own vulnerability or our ability to make mistakes. By facing these fears, we learn to embrace the parts of ourselves that we have previously rejected. And in doing so, we experience a deeper sense of wholeness. Jung argued that the integration of the shadow and the facing of our fears is not an intellectual process, but a deeply emotional and psychological one. It requires us to delve into the unconscious, to explore the hidden parts of ourselves that we may not even be aware of. This process is not easy. It involves confronting the darkest aspects of our psyche, the parts of ourselves that we are most ashamed of, most afraid of, and most reluctant to face. But it is through this confrontation that we experience the deepest healing. The gifts of facing our darkest fears are many. First and foremost, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves. We begin to see the ways in which our fears have shaped our behaviors, our relationships, and our choices. We become more self-aware, more conscious of the unconscious forces that influence our lives. This awareness gives us the power to make more conscious choices, to act from a place of authenticity, and to live in alignment with our true nature. Secondly, by facing our fears, we become more resilient. We learn that fear is not something that needs to control us, but something that we can navigate. The more we confront our fears, the more we realize that they are not as powerful as we once believed. We discover that we have the strength to face whatever comes our way, and that fear, while uncomfortable, is not something that can defeat us. By embracing our fears, we gain the strength and courage to move through life with greater confidence and ease. Finally, facing our darkest fears leads to a deeper connection with others. When we confront our own vulnerabilities and fears, we become more compassionate toward the vulnerabilities of others. We begin to see that everyone carries their own shadows, their own fears, and their own repressed material. By accepting our own darkness, we become more capable of accepting the darkness in others. This leads to more authentic relationships, built on mutual understanding, acceptance, and compassion. In the end, the hidden gift of facing our darkest fears is the freedom to be fully ourselves. When we are no longer controlled by our unconscious fears and repressions, we are free to live authentically. We no longer need to hide behind masks or pretend to be someone we are not. We can show up as we truly are, imperfections, contradictions, and all. This freedom is not the absence of fear, but the ability to live with fear, to embrace it, and to move forward in spite of it. This is the true liberation that comes from confronting the darkest parts of ourselves. As we continue the process of facing our darkest fears, it becomes clear that this journey is not one of merely confronting the surface-level anxieties or superficial phobias we experience. True transformation begins when we confront the deeper, more primal fears, the fears that lurk beneath the surface of our consciousness, often hidden in the unconscious mind. These fears are not just about external threats or dangers, but about the very core of who we are. Our fears of inadequacy, our fears of not being loved, our fear of death, and our fear of losing our identity. Jung understood that these deeper fears are often what drive us to create false personas, masks that we wear in the world to hide our vulnerabilities. We construct these masks to protect ourselves from the painful reality that we are not in control, that we are, in essence, fragile human beings. These fears can be so deeply ingrained in our psyches that we may not even be consciously aware of them. They may manifest in our behaviors, our relationships, and the patterns that we find ourselves repeating throughout our lives. For example, if we fear rejection, we may become people pleasers, constantly seeking approval from others in an attempt to feel valued and loved. If we fear failure, we may avoid taking risks or pursuing our dreams, convincing ourselves that we are not capable of succeeding. These behaviors, while protective in nature, are ultimately limiting. They keep us trapped in cycles of insecurity and and self-doubt. However, when we are willing to face these fears head-on, when we stop running from them and begin to understand their true nature, we begin to uncover the hidden gifts that lie beneath. One of the most profound gifts of confronting our darkest fears is that we begin to break free from the unconscious patterns that have governed our lives. As we become aware of these patterns, we can begin to make more conscious choices. We stop being controlled by the fear of rejection or failure, and we start acting from a place of self-awareness, authenticity, and strength. This is the beginning of true freedom, the freedom to be who we really are, without the need to conform to societal expectations or to seek external validation. Jung believed that the fears we face in the process of individuation, the journey to becoming the whole, authentic self, are not obstacles to be overcome, but essential parts of the transformation process. By confronting and integrating these fears, we are able to shed the false identities and personas we have constructed in order to fit into the world. We stop being limited by the fear of judgment, the fear of not measuring up, and the fear of being rejected. Instead, we become more connected to our inner truth, more aligned with our deepest desires and values. This process of facing our fears also involves confronting our own mortality. Jung often spoke about the fear of death, which is a fear that lies at the heart of many of our anxieties and neuroses. The fear of death is not just about the physical end of life, but about the loss of control, the fear that we will not have lived a meaningful life, or that we will be forgotten. This fear drives many of us to cling to external accomplishments, to seek status or power, or to become obsessed with material wealth and success. We attempt to make our lives meaningful by accumulating things or achievements. But this only masks the deeper existential fear of death and impermanence. However, Jung understood that true freedom comes from confronting this fear directly. The more we resist the reality of death, the more we are bound by it. But when we accept the inevitability of death, we can live more fully in the present moment. We stop wasting time on things that ultimately do not matter, and we begin to prioritize what is truly important: love, connection, authenticity, and personal growth. When we embrace our mortality, we are liberated from the fear that drives us to seek meaning through external means. We are free to live authentically, knowing that our time is limited and that every moment counts. The gifts of facing our darkest fears also include a deeper understanding of our relationship with others. As we confront our own shadows and vulnerabilities, we become more empathetic and compassionate toward others. We stop projecting our own fears, insecurities, and judgments onto those around us. Instead, we see them as fellow travelers on the journey of life, each carrying their own shadows and struggles. This understanding allows us to form more authentic, deeper connections with others, as we no longer need to wear masks or pretend to be something we are not. When we are free from the grip of our fears, we can truly see others for who they are without judgment or projection. We can offer love and compassion without expecting anything in return. Our relationships become more genuine, more loving, and more fulfilling. We are no longer trapped in patterns of codependency, manipulation, or power struggles. Instead, we can engage with others from a place of mutual respect, vulnerability, and authenticity. One of the most profound aspects of facing our fears is that it leads to a deep sense of personal empowerment. Fear often holds us back from taking risks, from pursuing our dreams, and from stepping into our true potential. But when we confront our fears, we realize that they are not as powerful as we once believed. The more we face our darkest fears, the more we realize that we are capable of handling whatever challenges life throws our way. This realization fills us with a sense of empowerment as we come to understand that we are not helpless victims of our circumstances. We have the strength and resilience to navigate life's challenges with grace and courage. Jung's concept of individuation is about becoming whole, and this wholeness comes from embracing both the light and the dark aspects of our being. As we confront our fears, we come to realize that the parts of ourselves that we once considered dark or negative are actually vital components of our growth. They are not to be feared or rejected, but to be integrated into our understanding of who we are. By accepting and embracing our fears, we move toward a deeper sense of unity within ourselves. This process of integration is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong journey. As we grow and evolve, we will encounter new fears, new challenges, and new aspects of our shadow that need to be integrated. The key is to remain open, to continue facing our fears with courage and curiosity, knowing that each fear is an opportunity for growth and transformation. The more we face our fears, the more we become the person we are meant to be. We shed the layers of false identity and limitation, and we come into alignment with our true selves. Ultimately, the hidden gift of facing our darkest fears is the freedom to live authentically and fearlessly. We no longer need to be controlled by our unconscious fears, our insecurities, or our old patterns. We are free to embrace life in all its complexity and uncertainty, knowing that we are capable of navigating whatever comes our way. This freedom is not the absence of fear, but the ability to face fear with courage, grace, and self-awareness. It is the freedom to live fully, to love deeply, and to be our authentic selves without the need for validation or approval. As you continue on the path of confronting your darkest fears, you begin to recognize that fear is not a singular experience, nor is it something to be fixed. Fear is a teacher, a guide, one that, when properly understood, leads to deep transformation. This transformation does not happen overnight. It's an ongoing process of growing into the person you are meant to be, shedding layers of false beliefs and false identities in the process. In Jungian terms, this is the continuation of the individuation process, where we integrate not just the light aspects of our personality, but also the darker, hidden aspects of ourselves. The shadow. The integration of the shadow is a pivotal part of spiritual growth, and Jung emphasized the necessity of doing this work. Without confronting our fears, without facing the parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore or deny, we remain fragmented. The fear of facing these aspects of ourselves keeps us stuck in patterns of self-deception, avoidance, and repression. These are the very patterns that prevent us from becoming whole, from living authentically. In this way, fear itself becomes the crucible for our transformation. We must not shy away from it, but allow it to show us what we must integrate into our being. One of the most profound gifts of confronting fear is the freedom it offers. By addressing the root causes of our fears, we liberate ourselves from the unconscious forces that hold us back. Jung explained that this liberation is not about eliminating fear entirely. It's about understanding its origin, recognizing its role in our lives, and allowing it to no longer control our actions. When we see fear for what it truly is, it loses its grip on us. No longer is it a force that controls our decisions, our relationships, or our sense of self-worth. This liberation opens up new pathways for creativity. When we are no longer held back by the fears and limiting beliefs that once ruled us, we begin to access a deeper, more creative part of ourselves. The fear of judgment, failure, or being misunderstood often stifles our ability to create and express ourselves fully. But when we confront and release these fears, we allow our authentic creative energy to flow freely. This energy, which was previously blocked or suppressed by our unconscious fears, becomes a source of empowerment and inspiration. Jung understood that creativity is not just about creating art or writing. It is about living in alignment with our deepest truths. Every moment of our lives offers us the opportunity to create. Whether in the choices we make, the relationships we cultivate, or the way we approach challenges. The ability to live authentically without the burden of fear is an act of creative expression in itself. By confronting our fears, we awaken this latent creative potential within us and use it to shape our lives in ways that are true to our inner being. Moreover, the gifts of facing our darkest fears extend beyond the personal realm. They reach into our relationships with others. Fear, when left unaddressed, often manifests as projection. We see our own unresolved issues and repressed emotions reflected in others and respond with judgment or defensiveness. By facing our fears, we stop projecting these internal conflicts onto the people around us. Instead, we develop greater compassion and empathy, understanding that everyone is on their own journey of confronting and integrating their own shadows. This shift in perspective transforms the way we relate to others. We no longer need to compete or compare ourselves to others because we no longer view them through the lens of fear and insecurity. When we embrace our authentic selves, we create space for others to do the same. This fosters healthier, more genuine relationships based on mutual respect, vulnerability, and acceptance. It also helps us develop the ability to love others without conditions, as we no longer need to control or manipulate the relationship for validation. Facing our darkest fears also opens us up to a deeper connection with the world around us. Jung believed that the unconscious is not just a personal realm, it is a collective one. The fears and patterns we experience individually are often mirrored in the collective unconscious, which binds humanity together. By confronting our personal fears, we contribute to the healing of the collective. When we become more integrated and whole, we help to heal the collective psyche, creating a ripple effect that touches others in ways we may not immediately see. This interconnectedness with others and the world deepens our sense of meaning and purpose. As we face our fears, we move closer to understanding our place in the larger scheme of life. We begin to see that we are not separate from others, but that our journeys are interwoven. The process of confronting and integrating our fears becomes a path toward collective healing and spiritual awakening. In this way, fear is not just a personal challenge, it is a universal one, shared by all of humanity. One of the more subtle yet powerful gifts of facing our darkest fears is the development of inner resilience. As we confront each fear and integrate it, we strengthen our inner foundation. This resilience does not mean that we are immune to pain or hardship. Rather, it means that we have the strength and fortitude to face life's challenges with greater wisdom and grace. The more we face our fears, the more we realize that we can weather life's storms, no matter how fierce they may seem. This resilience is born from the trust we develop in ourselves as we move through fear and come out stronger on the other side. Jung spoke of the importance of embracing the tension of opposites, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the fear and the courage. Because it is in this tension that true growth occurs. By facing our darkest fears, we are not simply eliminating the negative aspects of ourselves. We are integrating them, creating a more balanced, whole, and authentic self. In this way, we can experience the full richness of life, including both the joy and the sorrow, the love and the pain, the peace and the chaos. At the heart of this process of facing fear is the cultivation of self-compassion. As we confront the darker aspects of our psyche, we may feel shame, guilt, or self-judgment. However, Jung understood that true healing begins when we accept ourselves fully, flaws and all. Fear is not something to be ashamed of. It is part of the human condition. It is through self-compassion that we can embrace these fears and allow them to transform into sources of strength, wisdom, and empowerment. When we stop running from our fears and instead face them directly, we find that they lose their power over us. We are no longer prisoners to our unconscious patterns or our deepest anxieties. We become more free to live our lives authentically, to take risks, and to fully embrace the journey of individuation. True peace comes from the deep, transformative work of facing our fears, not as obstacles to be avoided, but as gifts that lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.